Good morning, everyone. I'm Myriam Bovéda. I'm team leader for sustainable growth in the Directorate General for Regional and Urban Policy in the Commission. I have the pleasure to moderate this session on the Territorial Just Transition Plans. We will have an outlook on progress and programming in these plans. Programming negotiations with the member states on cohesion policy, including on the Just Transition Fund, are now ongoing. And member states need to prepare a strategic territorial just transition plan to unlock the 19.2 billion euros of GTF resources. And these plans need to focus on the territories that are expected to be most negatively impacted by the transition to climate neutrality. So far, 18 member states have received support from the Commission Structural Reform Support Directorate General. And I have to say all member states who have requested support have received it. This session will give you an update on the ongoing preparations, on the lessons learned so far, as well as some experiences that will be shared from our certain member states, which are more advanced than others on the preparations. We will have presentations on the preparation of the plans from Slovakia, from Greece, and from Finland. And then this session will be followed by 20 minutes question and answers. So please free to start sharing your questions in the chat. So that when we reach that time, we can answer them and we receive as many questions as possible. So without further delay, I will give the floor to my colleague Sander Happerts, who is in charge of coordinating the Just Transition Fund in the Directorate General for Regional and Urban Policy. Sander, the floor is yours. Sander will give us an update on the preparation on the TJTPs.
Thank you very much, Myriam, and good morning to everyone. Welcome to the second day of the Just Transition Platform meeting. Indeed, we thought it was important to give a bit of an update from the side of DG REGIO on where we actually are with the Territorial Just Transition Plans, which is, I think, something that you will be interested in. If you go to the next slide, please, here I show, just as a reminder, the three pillars of the Just Transition mechanism. Why? Because it's important to remember that the Territorial Just Transition Plans are actually the key that opens the door to these three pillars. So not just to the Just Transition Fund, but to the three pillars of the Just Transition mechanism. On the next slide, I give a quick update on the programming. So there are several options in terms of program architecture and how the programs match with the Territorial Just Transition Plans, or TJTPs, depending on member states' own governance. We in the Commission, we prefer programming close to the ground, and this is why in a small number of cases it is not yet fully clear how the program architecture will look like. So there can be self-standing programs. This means a program with only the Just Transition Fund, or there can be multi-fund programs where the Just Transition Fund is included in a program that also has, for instance, the European Regional Development Fund. There can be one program in a member state, or there can be several programs, regional programs. And each program which has the JTF will have at least one, but can also have more than one Territorial Just Transition Plans, for instance, one for each territory. We are expecting around 70 Territorial Just Transition Plans in total, which would be linked to a bit more than 40 different programs. So this is the situation as it stands for program architecture. What we can say also is that from 2 member states, we have received already the formally submitted JTF programs, which are linked to 4 TJTPs. So one of these member states is Greece, which you will hear about in this session. What we need to also stress is that none of these programs and none of these plans have been approved yet by the Commission. So we are still assessing these 4 ones that are formally submitted, but we are also in discussion with most of the other member states on an informal basis on informal drafts. So this is also an important nuance, that everything that you will hear from member states in this event refers to plans that are not yet finally approved. So the final plans may still change compared to what is presented today or tomorrow. We expect most of the plans to be submitted to the Commission early next year, and we really hope that there is no further delay because of the pandemic and other reasons we have experienced, as you know, an overall delay in cohesion policy programming. This is not specific to the Just Transition Fund. Now, on the next slide, I draw a few very general lessons learned from the ongoing dialogue that we are having with all of the 27 member states. And first, we really need to stress that we are impressed by the investment of local actors and public administrations in the programming of the JTF. This is also something that you will hear from Mr. Richter later on, because the response to the support offered by the Commission and by DG Reform has been really very good. From the draft plans that we have seen, we are very happy that several of them display very ambitious visions and really try to turn the challenge of the climate transition into an opportunity for the negatively affected regions to really have a new future and to let the JTF help them build a new future in line with the climate transition. This refers also to the carbon intensive regions for whom it was not always easy from the start to describe these transition pathways and its impacts, but this is really going well in several of the cases, and we're really happy to see the progress also when we compare current drafts with initial drafts. But then still, as we are here today in the situation that none of the plans are finally adopted yet, it's good to also refer to some things that could still be improved. And there it's very important to stress that everything starts from the transition process. So we need to know what the transition process at national level is towards a climate neutral economy and how at territorial level this transition process will be implemented. We still see in some cases that the description of this process is incomplete, and this is a problem because everything else follows from that. Another weakness that we see in some cases is that the Just Transition Fund, while it is actually really something that should not be business as usual, seems to be approached as a sort of ERDF plus, meaning that some seem to think that they can invest a little bit of everything with the Just Transition Fund, whereas we really needed to be focused on what are the most negative impacts of the transition in the affected territories. In terms of things that could be further developed is especially the dimension of skilling and reskilling, which is one of the 2 key priorities of the Just Transition Fund. And then turning to some other things that we think should still be improved is that if member states plan to invest in productive investments in large enterprises or in investments reducing greenhouse gas emissions from ETS activities, these are possibilities under the Just Transition Fund. It needs to be very well justified, and this is often not yet the case. The complementarities with the other 2 pillars of the Just Transition mechanism should be developed much more. So in some draft plans, we see 1 or 2 sentences, and this is really not enough. We need to see that it is thoroughly planned how the full specter of the Just Transition mechanism will be used. And finally, but not last but not least, I would say we really will check in the plans if the description of the participation process, of the governance process is as it should be according to the partnership principle. Now, if in the next slides, I will just highlight a couple of these issues, but I will go, I will not spend too much time on them. I can always come back in case there are questions. But since in a small number of member states, we still have a discussion on potential extension of the geographical scope of the JTF, it's really good to remind that territories will only be eligible if it's very well justified that they face at member state level the biggest challenges in the transition to climate neutrality. So in the Territorial Just Transition Plans, it will have to be demonstrated that such territories are dependent on fossil fuels, which will decline, or on carbon-intensive industries, which will significantly transform, and that this process has a negative effect on the territories. In the next slide, I would like to stress the transition process, which I referred to already, which really in each TJTP should be described at national level with a timeline of key transition steps towards the 2030 and 2050 targets. And at territorial level, it needs to be demonstrated that this transition process has an impact, and that this impact will be felt during the lifetime of the JTF, so to speak, so by 2030 or before. So this is really a very, very key condition of the JTF. And then following from that, on the next slide, the plans need to show very clearly what are the negative impacts of that transition process. So these impacts can be different because each region in the EU is different. So this is okay, but it needs to be very clearly an impact that derives from the transition. So here we are not satisfied if we only see a general description of the region of things that are not related to the transition. So for this, we will have other funds as well. But for the JTF, this really needs to be very clearly demonstrated that it addresses the negative impacts of the transition. And then in a final step, in the next slide, the final step of this intervention logic is the operations that can be supported by the JTF. So indeed, the Just Transition Fund regulation has a list of things that can be funded, but not all these things will necessarily be funded in all of the cases. So what we will be able to fund in the JTF will be things that are eligible, but that are clearly addressing the negative impact of the transition. So you see that the intervention logic of the TJTP really has a couple of steps which follow very clearly from each other. And here again, in the operations to be supported, we will check very carefully if each TJTP focuses sufficiently on the two key issues, which are reskilling and economic diversification. And the other activities can, of course, also be funded, as I said, if it is clearly shown that they address the impacts of the transition, which is also what the regulation tells us to do. Now, in the next slide, this I have said already. So the complementarities, especially with Pillar 2 and Pillar 3, need to be really very well demonstrated and anticipated in the plans. And then last but not least, in the next slide, I stress again this partnership principle, which is a key principle of cohesion policy and is, if you want, even more important to us for the JTF. So we really want the territories and the people of the territories to be at the table when the future of their regions are designed. And this includes, of course, the local authorities, economic and social partners, civil society, research institutions, youth, very important, which is why we last year published a toolkit on involving youth for a just transition. And here also allow me to mention gender equality, because we also have a very interesting session on this this afternoon. And then in my last slide, I just give you here the link to the staff working document that we published weeks ago on the Territorial Just Transition Plans, which again explain some of these issues that we're talking about today. I'm also happy to announce that translations in the EU languages are available of these of this staff working document. So I will stop here and I hand the floor back to Myriam.
Thanks a lot, Sander, for this very detailed presentation and already very complete feedback on the plans we have received. I have to say that Sander has looked at all the versions, drafts of the TJTPs that we have received so far. So to indicate the process, our geographical units in DG REGIO are dealing with the managing authorities in charge of preparing the programs, and our unit is looking at the programs submitted to us or sent to us by the geographical unit. So the entry point is the managing authority and the geographical unit. So as we see, we have received 40 TJTPs, but Sandra has looked at all versions of previous TJTPs and has sent many comments already. And we hope that we will be able to adopt very quickly programs containing the TJTPs and the Just Transition Fund. As my Director General said, Marc Lemaitre said yesterday, time is pressing, and we need to anticipate the transition as quickly as possible. So for the preparation of the Territorial Just Transition Plans, Member States have been able to count on the precious support offered by the Director General of the Commission in charge of structural reform support of the European Commission, and my colleague Kaspar Richter, who is head of the Sustainable Growth and Business Environment Unit, will give us an overview of the lessons from the technical support deployed to help preparing the Territorial Just Transition Plans. In particular, 18 member states have received this support. The floor is yours, Kaspar.
Many thanks, Myriam. Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. As Myriam said, I come from DG Reform of the European Commission, and we've really had the pleasure to be working closely with REGIO and closely with 18 member states on this preparation of these territorial just transition plans that are so critical to unlock the access to the funds under the JTM. What I'll be doing in my presentation is essentially to reflect a bit on this work by covering 4 points. I'll talk a little bit about the instrument that we use to provide this support. Then I tell you a little bit about how we put this support together, then what this support really was about, and finally draw a few lessons. And just to highlight on that point, first of all, as Sanders explained, these are obviously early lessons because ultimately the proof of the pudding will be the approval of the plans, and that's still ahead of us. And secondly, happy to say that the lessons that we draw are quite similar to some of the points that Sanders has raised. So some of the issues you will hear again about. Next slide, please. So I'm working at DG Reform. DG Reform has the mandate to support member states in developing and implementing reforms. We do that through the technical support instrument, which has 3 important features. So first of all, it's a demand-driven instrument. So through this instrument, member states can approach us and request support, technical support, that means expert advice, in order to design and implement reforms. So we do that on demand of member states, which is really important because we believe ownership is critical of the reform agenda for its success. Secondly, it's a really flexible instrument because it covers really all the relevant policy areas for growth, investment, jobs. And secondly, we can come in with that support at any stage of the reform cycle, upfront in the preparation, in the implementation, or also at the end for the evaluation. Now, the last feature I wanted to flag is that we have a budget available for this program period. It's these 864 million euros, so about 115 per year. And that means the expert advice provided under these projects comes for free, in a sense, financially to member states, because we use the budget to pay for this expertise. So there is no co-financing requirement, and also the contractual part of the work we take on, member states don't have to worry about this. Now, this is the TSI, the support that we've provided, in fact, on the Territorial Just Transition Plans on the predecessor program, which was called Structural Reform Support Program, which exactly had the same features. Next slide. Now, we have provided, as Myriam said, we've provided support to 18 member states. If we counted it correctly, it's something like 70 regions over the last year and a half. And as you can see, the support ranged from Bulgaria to Sweden across the EU. Next slide. And that brings me basically to the second point. How have we put this support together? Well, it started off, of course, with the work from REGIO and the Commission in proposing the regulation on the Just Transition Fund in January 2020. And in coordination with REGIO, we then launched a dedicated call to member states in February, inviting them to request support on these preparations of these Territorial Just Transition Plans. We've got 18 requests from member state end of March, and we're really happy to be able that we essentially could support all member states that requested that support. And then we sought the expertise in the market through consultancy firms. So we run those procurement procedures, and we were able to put the first project on the ground end of September, so less than 6 months after we had launched the request. And by over the summer this year, more or less, our technical support projects wrapped up in most member states. There are 2 member states where the work is still ongoing. So we're actually quite happy in terms of the great collaborations with member states and the contractors to deliver that report timely in spite of all the difficulties around the pandemic. Next slide. So this brings me to the third point. What was the support about? Well, we wanted to be as practical as possible. So essentially, we focused on the main areas that were flagged as part of the JTF regulation, including its annex. And there were really 4 areas. One was really about the outline of the transition path, the transition process by 2030 at the national level, as well as doing an assessment of what that transition path to climate neutrality would mean economically, environmentally, socially. Then the second point was then for those most affected territories in a member state to really help them put together an action plan with specific measures and interventions to tackle the impact of that transition, with a focus again on economic and social issues and also a bit of environmental issues. A third element was around the whole governance mechanism of this just transition, the different layers of government and the different ministries. And then a third point that Sanders also highlighted, really the key role of stakeholder consultations in line with the partnership principle that underpins all cohesion programs. Next slide. So basically, these were the 4 core elements. It was, of course, up to member states to decide whether they wanted all those 4 elements covered or were a bit selective, but in most member states, we really covered those 4. Now, there were additional elements, bells and whistles, if you wish, of our technical support that were a bit more specific, and again, where member state could decide whether they're interested in such support or not. And in particular, that concerns aspects of sort of how detailed the modeling was going to be on the transition pathways. What were the member states' experiences that a particular region or member state was interested from other EU countries? The point around that Sanders also mentioned, the point around large enterprises, emission trading system, where support was possible, but really on an exceptional basis and had to really be justified well by the transition challenges. And another point, how the support on the first pillar is really interacting with the other pillars of the JTM, the Recovery and Resilience Facility and other funds. So these complementarities, which shouldn't be an afterthought as part of the plan, but really a core component of it. So all of this was basically tailor-made in line with the needs and requests of the regions and member state. Next slide. So there were two additional elements that we based our support on. First of all, fortunately, we had some previous experience prior to the regulation in 4 regions of 4 member states, Slovakia, Greece, Romania, and Spain, that allowed us already to tap a bit of knowledge base in order to roll out that support. And then the other element, which also was an experience we drew from through this support, was that really the collaboration with the policy DGs, in particular REGIO, of course, as the main DG responsible for the Just Transition agenda, but also EMPL and Klima was really important. So we really worked hand in hand with these DGs. Next slide. Now let's come to the last point. Basically, what are the lessons learned so far from this exercise? And I wanted to flag basically 5 lessons. So the first one is around stakeholder engagement, and in particular essentially how we can help member state or region, how we help them to make really the partnership principle valid in terms of this exercise. Now the first point was around awareness raising, and that concerned really the point that for everyone, the Just Transition mechanism and fund, of course, was a new instrument. And when we were putting in place that technical support, the regulation had actually not yet been fully agreed. So there was still some evolution of some specific clauses in the regulation. So on the one hand, what that meant is that we had a couple of details meeting together with REGIO to explain the contractors, the experts that provided advice to member states, what the regulation ultimately was about, that was agreed upon. And then also in the different technical support projects, we really emphasized raising the awareness on the elements of the regulation, and in particular the fact that the Just Transition Fund is not another fund to support the energy transition as such, but really it was about supporting the social economic challenges that those fossil fuel dependent and carbon intensive regions face. And here, just to quote the example of Czechia, where a number of workshops were organized in order to make Stelcos really aware about the role and objectives of the Just Transition Fund. Next slide. Sorry, previous slide still. And 2 other points on this. Obviously, the engagement of youth was critical, because the Just Transition Fund is part of the European Green Deal. It's about protecting the planet also for the youth. So the engagement of the youth was essential. There was the toolkit developed by junior professionals from REGIO that was very helpful. And here Slovakia was a great example. I will not talk about it, but I think Peter will cover it in his presentation later. And then, of course, we provided that engagement, the technical support in the context of the pandemic. That meant face-to-face interactions was really difficult. But at the same time, as much as possible, we try to also use that to our advantage. For example, in Spain, the online workshops that we held probably attracted more participation than they would have in normal circumstances, because as we know, online events often make it easier for people to attend. Next slide. So the first point was really about the stakeholder engagement. And these are the other 4 lessons. I will start with the need for strong cooperation across layers of government, so both national, regional, and local, because it starts from a national transition process that then has diverse impact at the local level, as well as obviously because it's an agenda cutting energy, climate, labor, economic. It involves lots of ministries, so that cooperation across the government ministries and layers is really essential. And here I wanted to quote the example of Greece. I hope Maria will agree that in Greece that was really good practice, because Greece very early on in the process established a Just Transition Committee, which involved 7 ministries and all the relevant regions and municipalities. Now, the second lesson is about the transition pathways. As we've heard from Sanders, if there's no clear clarity on what the objective in the member state is about climate neutrality, the commitment, it's very difficult to develop these pathways. One way around it was that we developed different scenarios, transition scenarios in modeling exercises. And here I wanted to quote the example of Romania, where we did that. And we had one scenario that involved the coal phase out, and that demonstrated that actually there were positive social and economic impacts of that. And we're happy to say that by now, Romania has actually committed to a phase out of coal by 32. The next lesson, again, about the intervention logic. So as Sanders had already highlighted, the actions really need to derive from the challenges. And it was the initial starting point was often a long list of interventions that were sometimes more details than description of challenges. And so it was really important to look at that closely and make sure that actions are really justified on the basis of the specific challenges that derive from that pathways to climate neutrality. And here the example of Poland is interesting, because that aspect drew a lot of attention, and I think in the end we succeeded to have a good match between the challenges and the proposed actions. And then the fifth lesson here is on managing implementation risks, which is essentially saying, well, once the plan is approved, it's all about the implementation. And there really is the challenge on absorption, because in addition to the funds on just transition, there are, of course, the other cohesion funds. There is the Recovery and Resilience Facility. So the issue, will member states and regions be able to absorb these funds while maintaining quality of investment is a key challenge. So that means that bottlenecks for investments also need to be addressed, sometimes going beyond the pure agenda of the just transition. And here the example of Sweden is interesting, where, for example, the issue of permitting was identified, and we are now discussing with Sweden technical support that we might be able to provide in this area. So that brings me to the next slide. A few conclusions. So first of all, I think really we try to focus on the key components required in line with the regulation, but the idea was not to draft the plans, but really to provide the evidence base that then member states and regions could use in the preparation of their plans. And now we are really in that phase, the finalization and the submission of the plans to the Commission. And then the next step with this is, of course, the implementation. And here we really would like to continue our support in line with member state needs. And so for the upcoming technical support that we will be launching next year, we've suggested member states to request additional support to help them on the implementation, focusing on 3 issues. On the Pillar 2 dimension, the Just Transition Scheme, through InvestEU and the national promotional banks, we've offered to come in and build capacity in national promotional banks on the Pillar 2 so that they can provide support to the regions in line with the Just Transition philosophy. A second element is about specific aspects that regions face when it comes to the implementation of the Just Transition mechanism that may perhaps not be covered by other available technical assistance. And then the third point is that there are, beyond the regions and sectors that are currently covered by the JTM, there are, of course, lots of regions and sectors that actually face similar challenges in this pathway to climate neutrality, but are currently not eligible for the JTM, but may still actually benefit from similar advice. So we would be interested to working with such regions in order to allow them to benefit from similar tools that we have deployed so far. So just to wrap up, a last word, just to thank the member states and regions for the fantastic collaboration that we've had. We hope to wrap up the last 2 projects also successfully. A huge thanks to REGIO and the other colleagues from Ample and Klima for the fantastic collaboration. And we are really looking forward to continue this work on the implementation in the next 2 years. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kaspar, for your very complete presentation on the technical assistance provided so far, and we have received also several questions on the possibility to receive technical assistance, and you have also addressed this question. So technical support will be available, and you will launch a call. But I wanted to underline also that within the programs receiving the GTF support, we have also potential technical assistance that is available to do certain activities such as stakeholders meetings, and support really the partnership, the implementation of the partnership principle in the program. I think, and I wanted to thank you also for the very good collaboration. I think it's not by chance that the three presenters that we have for the 3 member states, Slovakia, Greece, and Finland, have also received support from DG Reform, and they are well advanced in their preparation. And I will let them now share with us their experience in preparing the Territorial Just Transition Plans. We know that this is not an easy exercise, and we are very attentive to their requests and to their needs also. So first we will hear from Mr. Peter Balik, his experience in Slovakia in preparing the TJTP. Mr. Peter Balik is Director General at the Ministry of Investments, Regional Development and Informatization. And he's in charge also of preparing the Territorial Just Transition Plan in Slovakia. Mr. Balik, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Thank you, Myriam. So I would like to present today the case of Slovakia in its preparation for the implementation of the Just Transition Fund. As you know, Slovakia is a neighboring country to the Czech Republic, Poland, which are also among those states that will receive support from the JTF. So we are also trying to be very closely in touch with our neighboring countries and to share experience. But right now I would like to focus on the Slovak case. We have, I would say, extensive experience with discussions with DG REGIO on the Just Transition Fund, but also with DG Reform on the utilization of various instruments, technical assistance instruments that are an absolute value added for our preparation for the implementation of the JTF. If we can move to the first slide. I would like to speak a bit about the eligible regions because this has been also tackled by Sander. Originally, we were considering 4 regions. Right now, we are considering 3 regions because one region, Bratislava region, was confirmed as not eligible for the Just Transition. 2 regions in Slovakia, the Upper Nitra region, a former, and a still mining region, extensive mining region, has been confirmed as eligible, as well as the Košice region in the east of Slovakia, due to its high CO2 emissions from the heavy industry, especially in the metallurgic industry. And right now we are still in discussion with the European Commission regarding the Banská Bystrica region, which is actually located in between these 2 eligible regions, so in between Upper Nitra and the Košice region, which actually also in our understanding supports the arguments in favor of the eligibility of this region. We would like to see more of a focus of JTF on cross-regional projects to have a spillover and multiplication effect across the regions, and for this, the Banska Bystrica region would be very helpful, because in fact it would connect the two regions which were confirmed as eligible. And also, Banska Bystrica region has been formerly a mining region, so the mining activity has been stopped and phased out in the Banska Bystrica region in 2015, and this is also one of the main arguments why we think Banska Bystrica region might be eligible. We would like to not leave anyone behind. That is the motto of the Just Transition Fund, and that's why we think that the socio-economic impacts in the Banska Bystrica region, which are caused by former mining activities, should still be tackled with the help of the Just Transition Fund. The total allocation for Slovakia for the Just Transition Fund is 459 million euro, and our focus, besides the programming, is also already on the project preparation. We think that programming and strategic planning is, of course, the main cornerstone and the main basis for our potential future success. However, besides the good programming and the focus on the identification of needs and the possible activities, we are already also in the phase of identifying strong projects through informal calls for proposals from these regions, which helped us to identify well-prepared projects which will contribute to the transition of these particular regions. And later I will also deal with the support of DG Reform in our aim not only on the programming but also on the project preparation, which is an absolute crucial element of DG Reform's contribution to Slovakia. If we can move to another slide, please. In terms of the programming, and this has been also possible to specify based on the collection of project fishes from the regions, we were able to identify three main pillars of focus in the eligible regions in Slovakia. The three pillars are economic diversification, the focus on sustainable environment, and also the third pillar, the quality of life and social infrastructure. In the economic diversification pillar, we would like to pay attention to the support of digitalization of enterprises, to the support of small and middle-sized enterprises, but also to the support of spin-offs and startups with the help of the engagement of universities and the academic sector in the eligible regions. And with this, we would like to support the creation of innovative jobs in order to diversify the economy from a former or still existent heavy industry focus to more diversified, to a more innovative focus with the creation of jobs. I will also speak about the engagement of the youth, but especially here, the engagement of the youth was important because they were able to identify the areas which would bring future prospect for the regions to create innovative jobs and which would motivate them to remain in their regions. The second pillar is the sustainable environment, which is of course an integral part of our focus. Besides improving the energy efficiency of public buildings, which is, I would say, a cornerstone of this pillar, if we're also talking about phasing out coal from heating, central heating mechanisms. We are also focusing on the support of projects that will use hydrogen, especially hydrogen in the public transport, but also on the renewable sources of energy, especially solar and geothermal. Geothermal energy has been identified as a significant energy source in the eastern part of Slovakia, and it has the potential to phase out utilization of coal and burning of coal in the central heating system of the second largest city in the eastern part of Slovakia, Košice. And the third pillar, as I mentioned, we would of course like to pay attention to the support of quality of life and social infrastructure. As has been mentioned by Sander, the focus on skills is very significant. The support of upskilling and reskilling of former miners, but also of people who were not involved in the mining industry is important to us. So we are working together with local municipalities and local education institutions to support various trainings and scholarly activities focused on upskilling and reskilling, not only of young talents but also of older inhabitants of the regions. We would like to also focus on social care, because most of the people who were involved in the heavy industry and in coal extractions are, according to our analysis, older than 55 years, and that's why social care and a focus on improving the health of the local population is an absolute necessity if we are talking about the transition of coal regions in Slovakia. So these are the three main pillars. We are currently, we actually finished yesterday night the first version of the TJTP, which will be sent for consideration to the European Commission. So we have not yet started official negotiations regarding the TJTP. However, the European Commission has seen our thinking and our ideas before, also in the report that has been prepared as the basis for TJTP by our consultants, finance from DG reform, but also in our partnership agreement and in our operational program. Slovakia will have one single operational program for the whole new programming period, and JTF will be part of it. That's why we had to include already priority axis focused on JTF in the operational program as well. So we have basically three programming documents in Slovakia. It is the partnership agreement. Part of it is also related to JTF. We have the operational program, which includes a priority axis on JTF, and we have an annex to the operational program, and that is the TJTP, which has been finalized yesterday and will be shortly sent to the European Commission. If we can move to the next slide, please. What was and what is important for us in Slovakia is the focus on the participatory process. We have created and institutionalized the participatory process on the regional level within the partnership councils. The partnership councils are present in each region in Slovakia. They are responsible for the preparation of the integrated territorial strategies and the ITIs, the integrated territorial investments, and thematic working groups specifically devoted for JTF were established under these partnership councils, so that the ITIs and the JTF are hand in hand and that there are synergies between these programming and strategic documents on the regional level. Members of these thematic working groups on the regional level are, of course, the local and regional municipalities, the main business players and large industries which are still involved in burning and extraction of coal, but also other businesses, especially SMEs and those that have the potential to create jobs with an added value in the future. And I would not like to forget about the NGOs, which are heavily represented in these thematic working groups on the regional level, including environmental NGOs such as the Friends of the Earth. It's a similar organization to Greenpeace here in Slovakia. On the national level, we have interministerial working group, because JTF is a cross-ministerial and cross-sectoral fund. We wanted to discuss this also with other partners in our governmental system. So we have established this interministerial working group, which has its sessions on a monthly basis. And besides the Ministry of Investments, we also discuss the JTF with Ministry of Economy, Social Affairs, Environment, Finance, Education, and healthcare, and others. And on the European level, this is not yet included on the slide, but on the European level, we have also extensively established regular contacts with DG REGIO, but also with DG Reform, as well as with the European Investment Bank, with Jaspers, that is helping us in our efforts to prepare projects, early prepare projects which we can start the implementation with of the Just Transition Fund next year. And in this regard, I would like to thank to DG Reform for its help and added value that we have received, not only in the preparation of the TJTP, but also in the support of the early preparation of strategic projects, which will be financed from the Just Transition Fund. We have applied for this technical assistance last year in October, and actually last month we already had a kickoff meeting with our consultant that is going to focus on the preparation of state aid schemes for JTF, and also on the support of particular beneficiaries, which will start the implementation of the Just Transition Fund. And my last slide is dedicated for the involvement of youth into the preparation of the TJTP. This, we think, is also an interesting added value. It gives us a new perspective about what and how the transition should look like in the eligible regions. We have had several workshops, meetings, and surveys, online surveys with the youth in high schools and also in the universities related to the eligible JTF regions. We have received around 320 online surveys from young generation, which helped us also with the programming and with setting up specific schemes such as small grants for young people to support social projects in their local community to improve the attractiveness of the region, because this is the main challenge for our eligible regions for JTF, that the young generation is leaving the region, and if we want to attract and motivate them to remain in the region, we need to provide them a future and a vision and a perspective. So that's why we are extensively discussing this implementation of the Just Transition Fund with the young generation. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for this presentation, Peter. We are very much looking forward to receiving the Territorial Just Transition Plan for Slovakia. We cannot wait after this presentation even. And thanks a lot also for putting the emphasis on the partnership principle, which is very dear to us in DG REGIO, and in particular involving the youth, which is also essential for the transformation that we need to put in place. I will give now the floor to Maria Praghiati. Maria is an executive of the Technical Secretariat supporting the Greek Just Transition, the TJTP. She's part of the steering committee, which was established in 2020. And we are very much looking forward to your presentation. We know that Greece is very much advanced, so the Greek Partnership Agreement has already been approved by the Commission. It was the first one. Commissioner Ferreira was in Western Macedonia in September, and she was very much impressed by the work already done for the transition and phasing out of coal, of lignite in Western Macedonia. And she said that Western Macedonia could be a global paradigm in phasing out lignite. So we are looking forward to your presentation. The floor is yours, Maria. You need to unmute, Maria. I think you are still muted.
Forgot. Yes, thank you. Thank you again, Myriam. Good morning to everyone. I would like to congratulate you for the great work you are doing so far and for the organization of this very interesting seminar and for giving us the opportunity to present to you our proposal of the Just Transition Development Program and our territorial plans. And that the slide, please. The first slide is saying that we are the first member state that submitted officially to the Commission. The slide, please. Yes, to the Commission, the one Just Transition Development Program. We have one program for the JTF and 3 territorial plans, accompanied with a performance framework methodology document that was attached to the program. Next slide, please. Well, Greece, through the National Energy and Climate Plan, committed to remove the lignite power from its energy mix by 2028, while 80% of it by 2023, and to phase out oil and diesel power plants on the islands in 2029, accelerating their electricity interconnection with the continental system. The National Energy and Climate Plan will be updated next year in order to align with the Fit for 55 package, and we have the law for the climate that is under elaboration in our country now. Next slide, please. Well, actually, the transition from the lignite of the country's energy mix has already started in 2011, when the production decreased by 62.2%. And in 2019, the capacity utilization limited to 30.5%. Next slide, please. So, in order to make the best use of the complementarities and the synergies of all the available means and instruments, Greece decided to prepare and implement a comprehensive and quantified national Just Development Transition Plan. We call it a National Master Plan. It is broader than the Just Transition Development Program, aiming at regenerating the local economies of lignite mining regions, securing affecting jobs and creating new ones in the new emerging activities, coordinating the public consultation, and also coordinating the use of the available funding. As Kaspar said previously, the National Master Plan was developed by an interministerial government committee that was set up in 2019 and was supported by a Just Transition Steer Committee set up in 2020. The vision of the National Master Plan, as you see, is based on 5 key growth pillars, which is clean energy, manufacture and small industries and trade, smart agricultural production, sustainable tourism and technology and education, and is supported by 4 horizontal actions, which is the structural and digital infrastructure, the human resources skilling, upskilling, entrepreneurship guidance and motivation, and the new and alternative land uses. Next slide, please. The funding resources for this integrated plan, according to the eligibility, contains all the 3 pillars of the JET mechanism and the RRF, complemented by national resources from the Green Fund and the Greek Public Investment Program, but also resources from the other EU structural funds as complementary resources. The basis for the determination of the areas affected in our country was also the proposal of the European Commission in the country report for Greece during the 2019 European semester. And in this context, the Greek authorities developed 3 distinct territorial transition plans, one for the whole region of Western Macedonia, one for the megalopolis area, which is part of the region of Peloponnese, and one for the islands of South and North Aegean and Crete. And these 3 territorial plans are linked to the Just Transition Development Program, which is the pillar 1 of the Just Transition mechanism, under the partnership agreement 2021 to 2027, with a total budget of 1.63 billion euros. Next slide, please. Now you can see in the prize that the region of Western Macedonia will receive the lion's share in the new Just Transition Development Program. And also you can see the priorities of our program, where almost half of the budget is allocated to the priority for strengthening and promoting entrepreneurship. Next slide, please. Yes, in this great effort, we had a significant contribution also from DG Reform, and we thank you very much for this help that she provided us by assigning 2 targeted studies. The first implemented by the World Bank concerning the transition from coal of Western Macedonia, and the second one implemented by Deloitte for the preparation of the territorial plan of the North Aegean, South Aegean, and Crete, and an ongoing service offered by an embedded expert for providing capacity building to the technical secretariat is that will end with the approval of the program and the approval of the territorial plans. In addition, we had a number of significant institutions that provide us with granular analysis and input for the targeted areas on the state of play, but also on the impact of the transition. Next slide, please. The partnership was and still is the more essential part for building the ownership to the local level. So the Just Transition Development Plan Steering Committee prepared in cooperation with the competent regional authorities a representative and participatory partnership involving bodies of all sectors, as you can see, the local authorities, the research centers, representatives of scientific sectors and academics, economic and social partners, environmental organizations, and bodies promoting social inclusion, and established a very close cooperation with the universities and the rector authorities of the areas, Western Macedonia and Peloponnese, that are going to play a significant role to this transformation process. The consultation process on the territorial plans was held in 2 cycles. The first one was held on February 2021 for 1.5 months, accompanied by a specific structured questionnaire. So we had the views and the answers from the stakeholders. The last one on June 2021 as the final consultation, when the list of partners included were approximately 200 representatives, and online workshops so to raise the awareness of the local authorities and to learn about what the JTF is and the whole regulatory framework, and also to contribute and express their views on the planning of the program text. The next slide, please. Yes, well, the results of the consultation were codified by the technical secretariat and led to the revision of the territorial plans in issues like the enrichment of data, the creation of a holistic transition timetable, including the most important sub-actions, clarification on issues relating to land ownership, restoration and repurposing, further elaboration of the strategic options of the transition of territories, the introduction of flagship projects, and the adjustment, the enforcement of the governance and partnership chapter, which is a very crucial point to all this process. Next slide, please. I will give you some data for the identification of the affected areas. As far as the region of Western Macedonia is concerned, the withdrawal of the lignite plants and the closure of the mines are expected to have a significant impact on the region, but with different intensity between the regional units. The main focus being primarily in the regional units of Kozani and Florina due to their closure of the lignite extraction, and secondly in the regional units of Kastoria and Grevena due to the flows and interaction with the other 2 regional units in economic, business and employment level. For the Western Macedonia, you can see that the 87% of the installed capacity is located in the region of Western Macedonia. The development potential depends heavily on the lignite activity. The unemployment is still in the region the highest in the national level. The transition will affect at least 12,000 employees, and the region has developed so far a strong specialization in the mining, energy and water sector, and also has the highest dependency on district heating networks compared to the rest of the country. Next slide, please. In Peloponnese, the process will primarily affect the municipality of Megalopoli and secondly the neighboring municipalities of Tripoli, Egotinia and Michalia, also due to the interaction between the four areas, with the three areas with the megalopolis. 13% of installed capacity is concentrated in megalopolis in the regional unit of Arcadia. The economy of Arcadia depends to a large extent on the mining, energy and water sector, and that formulates 64% to the gross value added of the region. The lignite production and its effects create a total of 3,000 jobs and to the related activities of all the value chain. The workforce employed in the public power corporation in the lignite plant in Megalopoli exceeds the 1,000 workers, and the municipality of Megalopoli is dependent on lignite power generation also for the heating needs of its households. Next slide. The case of islands is not a case of core region, of course, but they are also affected by the transition due to the specific challenges. We have two categories of islands: the islands within interconnection programming and the islands for which no interconnection date is scheduled. We can pass through this slide also, and please. And to go to the main objectives for each territory identified. For the Western Macedonia, the target is to turn into an alternative energy hub, to reach the modernization and integration of the energy sector, the support of the existing businesses and support of startups in the areas of smart specialization, focus on research and innovation and its connection to the entrepreneurship, and for Megalopolis, the green transformation of businesses, the strengthening of research and technological development, and the radical upgrading of local capabilities in sectors like energy, agro-food, and so on. Next slide, please. For the island, it's the support for the employees of the local suppliers in the transformed sectors of the energy value chain, the energy efficiency, and the exploit of the potential of the clean energy production. Next slide, please. As I told you, we have flagship projects for the two main areas of Megalopoli and Western Macedonia. For Western Macedonia, the flagship projects are the Innovation Zone in Western Macedonia, the Green Data Center and Supercomputer, the Innovation Hub for the hydrogen and the connection with large energy investments in the renewable energy, and the Green School. And for Megalopolis is the development of a business and freight park in the municipality of Megalopoli, Innovation Hub and Green School as the case of Western Macedonia. Next slide, please, and last. The Just Transition governance system includes three parts. One is the Just Transition Special Coordination Authority for the coordination and management of all the means. The Metavasi SA, the Greek word for transition is Metavasi, is a legal entity of public law operating as a final key beneficiary, providing comprehensive and ongoing personal-led support to candidates for investment projects and other responsibilities linked to the implementation. And of course, the representation of the local actors through the Program Monitoring Committee, through the sub-monitoring committees as many as the territorial plans that are going to be set up, and the managing authority of the program with appointed executives and the managing authority of the regional programs of the affected areas. Thank you very much. So I think I was quick enough.
Thanks, Maria. We are running a bit behind schedule. I will immediately, thanks a lot for the presentation. I will give immediately the floor to Pasi Rantahalvari. He is from the Ministry of Employment and Economy from Finland, and he is in charge of the TJTP preparation in Finland. Pasi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and hello for everyone. I'm here in my home office in Helsinki. I have 3 slides. Can I have the next one, please? Okay, we have. I have to say that the starting point was quite difficult, and it was much more complicated than that we expected actually, and it's a lot of confusion and what JTF is all about. And there are a couple of things. First of all, okay, this is a new fund, and we have 14 regions, so that also make it quite difficult, and also because we have other new proposals coming like RRF and InvestEU, and lots of new proposals coming, and we have to prepare for all of them. So it's also making things more difficult. I can say it clearly. But then about because at starting point, as I said, it was difficult because first of all, there were lots of expectations that JTF could help, could give direct compensations for peat entrepreneurs, and that was not the case. It was not possible to give any direct aid, and that was also created lots of disappointments, I have to say it. And then on another point, and I think we are still having this misinformation that people or different directions are thinking that JTF is also about to support transition itself, and that of course it's wrong, and we have been working on that and to correct this misunderstanding. Still, I have to say that, but hopefully it will be clear in the near future. But then about what we have the base is because we have a commitment to decline energy peat emissions. That's the whole idea in Finnish case, and that's a pace is that we have. It's a difficult situation because our peat sector is really declining fast. I have to say that, and it's declining more fast than we expected. And also, what was not something that I was not actually expecting at first is about this last point, because there have been lots of demands from different politicians in regional level and also maybe in central government level, and that's not a good thing in my view, because we have been saying and repeating every time that JTF is a specific program, and it has a very specific task to do, and we have to keep on that, and we have a very clear JTF regulation and so on. But hopefully we can actually have common understanding in the end that actually JTF is about only to compensate those negative impacts of transition, and in our case is declining peat sector. Can I have next slide, please? But then about the best practices or good practices, and I can say that the main best practice is, one of the best practices in this case is this point of setting up of regional GATF coordination working group. So it's actually set up by the regions themselves, not by the ministry. And but there is a lot of our managing authority and also commission involvement in that working group, and and that's great. And okay, we also have a youth involvement as a specific region feature, and that's also what's happening at regional level. But the point, of course, is because this working group is, of course, it's about the exchange of information and learning from each other. But what I think is the main point here is actually this last point, that we have a flexible working method, and it's very intensive, and because we have been like I have been in contact with this working group almost, or now I am in contact almost in daily basis. So we have this constant working with between each other, and that's the main point, especially now because we have because regions are now, they are in the intensive phase when they are drawing up their plans, and we have I think we have already 4 drafts coming from the regions. So we have this step-by-step approach. I think it's needed. We started last February, and now in October or November we have 4th drafts, and they have been evolving during that time. But as I said, it's needed to have this kind of process, in my view, that you have first, second, third, and even fourth draft, because we have been, like Sander was explaining those weaknesses about these plans and this. I have to say that those weaknesses, we also had them in our programs and plans, especially last spring. But it is something that we are now going all the time in better direction. So that's why we need this kind of process, that we have different steps, and we have to keep regions and working all the time. It's not just that we send a letter that please have that we give a deadline and please send us your plans. It's not going to work like that, because it's not providing this possibility to have a real exchange of views and consultation and so on. But also what is a good, and I have to emphasize also that our constant informal talks with the Commission has also been very helpful for us. It really has been needed in case, and actually we are maybe right now our very good practice that we have agreed with the Commission that we are sending 3 pilots to the Commission, like informal check of those plans, so that we can, when we have the feedback concerning those plans, we can divide this feedback to all regions, because of course it's clear that we can't send all 14 plans as a pilot. We can send only 3, and then we can receive those the feedback, and then we share this information so that all the regions can use that same feedback. Because one thing is that we have learned that actually in this sense plans are quite similar to each other concerning the weaknesses or possible weaknesses, and that's why we can use that information. I like to underline here that regions have been doing really great work and very intensive work, but as Myriam was saying, that this is difficult task. It's not easy at all. And then, okay, the last point, I feel that's also very important, and it hasn't been all clear, and so that to make clear that what investments are possible to fund and which are not. But I think we are quite clear on this point right now, and especially I like to thank for the Commission also their involvement about this point here. And then can I have my last slide, please? So this is only to show up what are the main issues or themes coming up from the draft plans at the moment. So we have economic diversification. It's a very important point, the most important points in the plans. And then okay, we have to also take care of demographic concerns here, and that's especially concerning youth people, because they are losing their working opportunities. So we need to re-educate those people and to provide new opportunities. And then we have a quite also strong view focus on contributing to innovations, especially when it's concerning green technology, and also how to replace peat. And this is also the point that we are having this cooperation between the research and innovation institutions and SMEs. So the idea is, of course, to look for new businesses for SMEs. And okay, and then also we have to do something about those peat entrepreneurs, because the situation is the most difficult in this case for them. And so also because we know that they like to be entrepreneurs, that's very clear. But in case we have to look for new business opportunities for them as well, and also maybe how to look after new alternatives for reuse of peatlands. But to conclude, I can say that at the moment we're really working on intervention logic, and this has been a very helpful the process of what we have been doing. Right now it's going on, and that's a key point what I think concerning the plans, and regions are doing very well on that right now, and so actually I'm looking forward that we can plan to submit our plans with good quality and complete plans next spring. Thank you.
Thank you, Pasi, for underlining this very inclusive process that you have put in place in Finland for preparing the plans. And indeed, the intervention logic will be a key issue. And thanks for the efforts invested. We have now the Q&A session. We have received many questions, so we will extend our discussion a bit beyond 11 o'clock. In order to address as many questions as possible. The next session will start at 11:30, so we have a bit of time. I will start with the first question, which was addressed to Sander. It is the following one. At least some of the co-regions, the real impacts of the transition process will rise after 2030. How do you see the future of the GTF after 2030? I think this question was addressed already by my Director General Marc Lemaitre already yesterday, which is that we cannot preempt the next multi-annual financial framework, so this will be decided later by the Commission. Then there is a question, but Sandra, if you want to elaborate more on this, please go ahead.
Well, I think indeed this question was asked and replied to yesterday, but it allows me to re-emphasize that the JTF is not the ultimate fund that will make sure that Europe is climate neutral in 2050. What the JTF will do is that it will help those regions that are most negatively affected, that are hardest hit by the impacts of the transition in the coming years. I saw that there was also a question, and this question is not new. We have received it before. What happens to those member states that will still use coal after 2030, or how do you see this? And so indeed, the JTF will be there to focus on the most serious impacts that we see before 2030. So this means that it's the impacts that count. These impacts need to be demonstrated before 2030 in order to receive the JTF. The JTF is not a super big fund. It will not support all the coal regions in the EU. It will support the coal regions and the carbon-intensive regions that face the biggest challenges in the coming years. The other regions, of course, can also benefit from other EU funds. And to link this also to this issue of the phase-out date, I think my Director General also referred to this briefly yesterday. It's up to member states to decide on their phase-out if it's in line with the 2030 and 2050 targets. And some member states have a phase-out in 2030 or slightly after that. This is not something that determines whether or not the JTF can be used. It's possible that certain coal activities are only closed down after 2030. What we want to see and what we need to see in the Territorial Just Transition Plans is that this transition is very clearly planned, whether it is about coal or peat or carbon-intensive industries, and what the milestones are and whether they are in line with existing strategies and with the 2030 and 2050 targets. And then we need to see that this has a very clear negative impact before 2030. So these are the elements that determine whether a region can receive support from the Just Transition Fund.
Thank you, Sander. And then I have a question for Caspar on the TSI. Can the TSI still be applied for? And If it's the case, do the national states need to apply, or can it also be applied? Can territories do it on their own? So about who can apply for the TSI?
Thank you, Myriam. Thank you for this question. So the TSI works in annual cycles. We have actually just had our deadline for the forthcoming support in 2022, end of October, when member states and regions submitted requests for technical support, including on support for the implementation of the Just Transition mechanism. So currently we look at those requests that we've received, and then but before Christmas we still will select those projects that eventually then go ahead next year. So next year again there will be a deadline, end of October, and will be another opportunity for regions and member states to go forward with requests for support on just transition issues. So next year is another opportunity. Regions are very welcome to apply as well. What we have done is we have in every member state set up a coordinating authority, and requests from regions as well as line ministries are channeled through that coordinating authority for submission then of the requests to the Commission and DG Reform. So regions are absolutely eligible, but it follows the same process. The submission goes through the coordinating authority of the member state, but the member state itself has dedicated. Thank you.
Thank you, Kasper. And then I will give the floor to Peter on Bratislava. What about participation of trade union, organization and social partners in Bratislava? I understood Bratislava is not eligible, however,
yes,
for support. So,
well, I can address the question in general regarding trade unions. We have trade unions involved in the eligible regions in the thematic working groups that I mentioned as part of the Partnership Council. So, in Banská Bystrica, in Upper Nitra, and in Košice, we are talking together with the trade unions on JTF as well. Which of course is giving us a good access to the opinion of the business representation from the region about the needs and about the prospects that they would where they would envisage the transition. However, regarding Bratislava, I saw the question as well. Yes, it's not eligible. We have received written confirmation also from the European Commission. Well, the CO2 emissions in the Bratislava region are quite high, also in comparison to the eligible regions in Slovakia. However, the CO2 emissions in Bratislava are originated mainly in transport, which is of course the case also in other capital cities across Europe. And we understand that this would create a dangerous precedence, so we accept, of course, this decision. There will be other opportunities used for Bratislava to reduce CO2 emissions, but what is important for us right now is to continue discussions with the European Commission on the Banská Bystrica eligibility.
Thanks a lot, Peter. I will now ask a question to Maria. Why was it important for Greece to prioritize the transformation and move on it quickly, phase out coal by 2023 and submit the first plan?
Well, these are actually energy questions I'm not very familiar with, but as most of the electricity units have already covered the maximum of their capacity according to the permitted operation of the hours of their operational, and according to the EU directive. So this is the one reason. A second reason is because the quality of the lignite is very bad, and there's a high production cost. And of course the CO2 emissions, but this is something that is the same for everybody. I think this is 3 points.
Thank you, Maria. And I think we can also refer to Marc Lemaitre presentation yesterday, where he was saying that in order to be in the most comfortable situation, we need to anticipate change. And I think we welcome the position of anticipating change rather than being behind change. So we welcome the fact that Greece is anticipating this change. There is another question on hydrogen. I wanted to underline that there is also a session on hydrogen in this platform where you can subscribe. But Maria, will the production of hydrogen be based on renewables or gas?
Actually, yes, 100% from renewable sources and mainly from solar panels. It's a pilot project, and we count on it.
Thank you, Maria. And then now I will ask you questions to Pasi. Which alternative do you have for reuse of peatlands?
Okay. Yes. Thank you. We have quite lots of ideas. Maybe some of those ideas could sound a bit crazy. Maybe, I don't know. But it's about like one example is wind power systems. And because we are not quite in the early phase on this, but we have to be very open what to do, every kind of new possibility. But of course we know that it can't be related to fossil fuels and so on, and we have to keep in mind that it also has to minimize emissions from CO2 emissions. That's a basic lines, but this is something that we don't have, especially in the ministry, because we are not expert in this area, definitely in Helsinki. But this is one of the priorities in our program, is to make any different surveys and to see what is possible, because we know also that peatlands are different. They are not all the same in structure, and there can be different uses for peatlands, and that's why you need to know what those peatlands are like in different parts of Finland. And but you know, they're like forestation, and for example, is one like a classic example maybe, but also something related to that point. And I don't know, is it to aquaculture, cultivation? I'm not expert on these things, but it's another point. But also something really different, like wind power systems has been proposed. But it's all about now that okay, we know that it's still some time concerning this to implement these programs, so we don't know yet. But there's lots of effort in this area, how to make benefits about these peatlands for other purposes, because we know it's possible, and also regions are keen to find out it. So I think it's everything. It's open for any kind of new ideas in this sense now. But I think like forestation and aquaculture, cultivation may be something, or something related to those things, like more likable maybe. I don't know. But this is something that we are working on that. Yes. And also we are keen to, of course, we like to hear any proposals coming from anywhere concerning, from other member states and regions as well. I mean, of course. But it will be a point in our program. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Pasi. I will maybe give the floor now to Sander on the eligibility of Bratislava. You know that we are basing the eligibility on the regulation, and the staff working document has been published. So I would invite you to look at the staff working document to understand how we assess eligibility. Of course, as we said, we need to focus on the territories mostly affected by the transition. But Sander, maybe you can add a few words on this, and I will then give the opportunity to Kaspar to answer last question and close the session.
Thank you, Myriam. Yes, indeed, on the territorial eligibility, I will not go into the details of the case of Bratislava, but we have been discussing with several member states certain proposals that they had to extend the geographical coverage compared to what we have originally proposed. As member states know, this was in the European semester country report of 2020, and in a small number of cases we have already given a preliminary positive view, like in the case of Finland, for instance. But the ultimate decision is only when we adopt the Territorial Just Transition Plans. And in our discussions with member states, we have really stressed from the very beginning that all of such extensions need to be very well justified in terms of the transition process and the impact. So this is what I presented also earlier this morning. But what is also a very key criterion for us is that by extending the territories, we do not want to dilute too much the intensity of the JTF, and this is very important for the Commission. The JTF is really a novel approach to help the most negatively affected regions. So those proposals that were made, and this is, to be clear, was not the case in the Bratislava request, but some of the requests that were made to extend like with 5 times the areas covered have been also rejected. So several of these requests have been rejected, but having said this, the Commission is open to discuss well-justified proposals. In some cases, a small number of cases, we have given already a positive view when it was very well justified. And in some other cases, we are still discussing with the member states, such as the case for Banska Bystrica region. So these are our views on this.
Thank you, Sander, and maybe a last question to Kaspar. So are the outcomes of the technical assistance project in particular countries available to local communities? Do you also monitor any feedback on them?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we are very keen to make available the reports as much as possible, but essentially we do that in a two-step approach. First of all, I mean, the main goal of the technical support is, of course, to support the specific region or ministry or public administration. So that's the first goal. And then we discuss with them what material could be made public, so as to ensure that, of course, the member state and the region have reassurance that any sensitivities are taken care of. And then, indeed, we are actually, under the TSI regulation, we are now putting together a repository of the reports to make it available to a wide-ranging public. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaspar. Thanks a lot to everyone for the participation and to the speakers. We saw that work still needs to be done, and we have already seen very good elements in the Territorial Just Transition Plans. It's good to see that DG REGIO and DG Reform agree on the good elements, but elements that still need to be improved, such as a clear transition pathway and partnership in order to prepare the plans. And these partnerships will be key also to implement the plans. And we have heard of 3 very interesting experiences from Slovakia, Greece, and Finland, where also partnership was very important for them, and also intervention logic was stressed as a key part of the plans. I would like to underline that in the session that will be the closing session, the closing roundtable with the Executive Vice President Timmermans, we will hear more about some regions' plans. So please participate to this session if you want also to have more insights and seeing more regions sharing their experiences. Thanks a lot to all the speakers, and thanks to all the participants for attending this session.